I'm a 28-year-old forklift operator at a sprawling distribution center just outside Chicago, and I've spent the last 3 years dodging every ridiculous rule that management could possibly dream up. I've learned the hard way that when you work a job where the boss treats you like a piece of machinery, the best way to survive is to become a piece of machinery yourself, exactly the way they want you to be. That's why, when our regional director announced a zero-incident safety drill for the entire warehouse, I signed up with a grin that barely hid the plan already forming in my head. It started on a rainy Tuesday in late March. The PA system crackled to life, announcing that at 2 p.m. sharp we'd be conducting an unannounced safety drill. The rules were simple, at least on paper. Every employee must stop work, report to their assigned assembly point, and undergo a mandatory 30-minute safety quiz administered via a tablet mounted on the loading dock wall. Failure to complete the quiz would result in a written warning, and 3 warnings meant a suspension. The director, a man named Gregor the Hawk Halvorsen, had a reputation for making a big show of compliance, complete with flashing lights, a marching band of safety officers, and a giant banner that read, "Safety first, no exceptions." Now, most people would see this as an inconvenience, a disruption to their day. I saw it as an opportunity. Over the past year, Gregor had taken a particular pleasure in micromanaging the forklift routes. He'd posted a new set of optimized pathways on the wall, bright orange arrows that forced us to weave through the same narrow aisles at a snail-slow pace. He claimed it reduced accidents. The data showed a 0.2% increase in near misses, but the real motive was clear: control. The arrows made us look busy, kept us from taking shortcuts, and, more importantly, gave him something to blame if something went wrong. So when the drill was announced, I pulled up the company's safety manual on my phone. In the fine print, tucked between the sections on PPE and emergency exits, there was a clause that read, "In the event of a scheduled safety drill, all employees must cease all operational activity, report to their designated assembly point, and remain for the duration of the drill until cleared by a senior safety officer." No mention of continuing to operate essential equipment if it was needed to maintain safety, no mention of critical operations. The language was crystal clear, and it gave me an opening. At 1:45 p.m., I slipped a note into the pocket of my uniform, a reminder to myself: if the drill starts, do not leave the forklift unless you have a direct order from a senior officer. I also pulled the last spare tablet from the break room, a battered iPad that hadn't seen a software update since 2019. I knew the system would log each quiz attempt, and if anyone tried to cheat, the audit trail would be undeniable. The clock struck 2 p.m., and the PA crackled again: "All employees, please report to your assembly points. This is a mandatory safety drill. Failure to comply will result in disciplinary action." The warehouse floor erupted in a chorus of sighs and groans. Forklift operators tossed their loads onto pallets, coworkers shouted over the noise, and the safety officers, 2 lanky guys in neon vests, began marching down the aisles, waving clipboards like conductors. I did the only thing that made sense: I kept my forklift running. I turned the key, the engine hummed, and I drove to my designated assembly point, a painted circle near the far end of the dock, and parked directly inside it. I stepped out, lifted the tablet, and logged in. The quiz screen popped up with a bright red banner that said, "You have 30 minutes to complete this quiz." I stared at the questions. They were generic: what does PPE stand for? What is the first step in a fire evacuation? Easy. I answered them with the speed of a seasoned operator who's taken these drills 100 times. But the real trick was what I did next. While the safety officers were busy corralling the rest of the staff, I slipped the spare tablet into the back of the forklift's cab. I switched the primary tablet's display to inactive by tapping the submit button, though I hadn't actually finished the quiz. The system recorded a partial completion and logged a timestamp: 2:02 p.m., quiz started, quiz incomplete. Meanwhile, the safety officers, Officer Ramirez and Officer Patel, were shouting, "Everyone, stay where you are. Do not operate any equipment." They walked past my forklift, their eyes scanning the crowd, but they didn't see the tablet hidden in the cab. They assumed compliance because I was standing in the circle, hands clasped, looking like any other employee awaiting instructions. At exactly 2:15 p.m., Gregor Halvorsen appeared on a balcony above the loading dock, microphone in hand. "Ladies and gentlemen, this drill is a testament to our commitment to safety. Remember, the first rule: no equipment operation during drills. The crowd cheered, a half-hearted applause that sounded more like a sigh. I felt a smile tug at my lips. The drill was in full swing, and the entire warehouse was a static tableau of workers standing like mannequins. The only thing moving was the humming of my forklift. I knew that if I could keep the forklift running, I could prove that the drill's restrictions were absurd. If the only thing keeping us safe was a piece of machinery, why were we forced to stand idle? At 2:28 p.m., the safety officers began to check the quiz logs on a portable laptop. Officer Patel called out, "Who hasn't finished their quiz? Raise your hand." A few hands went up, but I kept my arm down, the tablet hidden. The safety officers moved down the line, checking each person's status. When they reached me, Officer Ramirez peered over my shoulder, squinting at the tablet screen. "Sir, it looks like you submitted your quiz early," Ramirez said, tapping the screen. "Did you finish it?" I swallowed, trying to keep my voice steady. I thought I'd just submit it early to get it out of the way. The questions were simple. I could see the confusion flicker across Ramirez's face. The system showed a submitted status, but the quiz score was 0% because no answers had been recorded. Patel raised an eyebrow. "That's unusual. According to policy, an incomplete quiz is a violation. You'll need to retake it after the drill." My heart pounded. I had a plan, but it hinged on the fact that the drill would end before they could enforce a retake. I needed to buy time. "Officer Patel," I said, "if I may, the forklift is the only piece of equipment that can move the hazardous materials we have in the back. If we're not allowed to operate it, those chemicals could leak. I think we're risking more than we're preventing." There was a pause. The safety officers exchanged glances. Gregor, perched above, leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "We have a protocol for that," he said, voice booming. "If any equipment is needed for safety, a senior manager must issue a written order. No exceptions." I swallowed. The rule was clear, but it gave me a loophole, a written order. I didn't have one, but I could force them to create one. "Fine," I said, trying to keep my tone calm. "I'll wait right here until the order comes through. In the meantime, I'm going to keep the forklift on standby, just in case." I slipped the spare tablet back out of the cab, logged into the warehouse's internal messaging system, and drafted a quick email to the plant manager, Susan Lee, with the subject line, "Urgent, potential hazard requires immediate forklift access." The email read, "Hi Susan, we have a small spill of industrial solvent in aisle 23. The forklift is needed to move the drums to a safe zone before the spill spreads. The safety drill is in progress, but we can't wait for a formal order. Please approve immediate use of the forklift. J. Carter." I hit send, knowing Susan was on a conference call but would get a notification. I turned my back to the safety officers and pretended to stare at the blank wall, but inside I was counting the seconds. 2 minutes later, the PA crackled again. "All personnel, the drill is now concluding. Please remain at your stations for a final debrief." The crowd shifted, the murmurs growing louder. The safety officers started gathering the tablets, checking for any missed quizzes. Officer Patel glanced at his laptop screen and frowned. "There's a pending request from J. Carter. Urgent forklift use for solvent spill." He raised his eyebrows. "Looks like we've got a situation." Gregor stepped down from his balcony, his expression a mix of annoyance and curiosity. "What's this about a spill?" he asked. I stood up, my voice louder than the surrounding chatter. "There's a small leak in aisle 23. The forklift is the only equipment that can safely move the drums to the containment area. I'm waiting for the written order." I pointed to the tablet on the floor, now showing the email thread with Susan's reply. The safety officers shuffled to the laptop, eyes scanning the screen. A few seconds later, a pop-up appeared, "Susan Lee, approved, immediate forklift access authorized for spill containment. Proceed with caution." The email was timestamped 2:32 p.m., a minute after the drill was supposed to end. A ripple went through the warehouse. Some workers whispered, some laughed, but the most satisfying part was watching Gregor's face turn a shade of red that matched the orange arrows on the wall. He stared at the email, then at me, then back at the email, as if trying to reconcile the fact that his own drill had forced him to issue a written order. "Fine," he said, voice a little hoarse. "You may operate the forklift for the spill. But you're still on a written warning for the incomplete quiz." He gestured to Officer Ramirez, who lifted the tablet and entered a new note: "Incomplete quiz, written warning issued." I nodded, took a deep breath, and climbed back into the cab. The forklift roared to life, the engine vibrating through the metal floor. I drove down the aisles, the orange arrows a blur behind me, and reached aisle 23. The spill was exactly as I described, a small puddle of clear liquid seeping from a cracked drum. I positioned the forklift's forks under the neighboring drums, lifted them, and carefully rolled them into the secondary containment area, away from the main traffic flow. The safety officers watched, half amused, half impressed. I could see the relief on Susan's face when she got a text that the spill had been contained. The drill was over, the warehouse returned to its normal rhythm, and the only thing left on the record was my written warning. The next day, I got an email from HR: "Your written warning for non-completion of the safety quiz has been recorded. Please note that further violations may result in suspension." It was a classic corporate move: punish the rule breaker while ignoring the fact that the rule itself was weaponized against us. What I didn't expect was the ripple effect. Within a week, the orange arrows vanished, replaced by a more sensible layout that actually reduced traffic congestion. Gregor was called into a meeting with senior management, and the minutes of that meeting, leaked by a sympathetic colleague, showed a note: "Re-evaluate mandatory no-equipment clause during drills, consider operational exceptions for safety-critical tasks." The safety officers updated the drill protocol to include a clause that allowed essential equipment to remain operational if a written order was issued. The company even posted a new banner on the wall: "Safety first, common sense always." And the written warning? It sat in my file, but it never led to a suspension. It became a conversation starter during performance reviews. My supervisor, who had previously dismissed my concerns, now asked me to help redesign the forklift routes, citing my deep understanding of on-ground operations. I got a modest bump in my hourly rate, and the respect of my coworkers grew. Looking back, the malicious compliance was more than just a petty revenge; it was a catalyst for a real change in a system that had been built on arbitrary authority. I didn't need to sabotage the drill or cause a scene. I simply followed the rule to the letter, refusing to stop the forklift until a written order was provided, while letting the bureaucracy force its own hand. The biggest payoff? The day after the drill, as I was clocking out, Gregor walked up to me, a forced smile on his face, and said, "Good work on the spill, Carter. Let's talk about those arrows later." I shook his hand, felt the weight of his grip, and thought about the next time he tried to micromanage my routes. I already had a plan. So, to anyone stuck under a manager who loves to dictate every movement, remember, the rules are a weapon. If you wield them correctly, you can turn any drill, any policy, any arbitrary demand into an opportunity to make the system work for you. And sometimes, the best compliance is the one that makes them ask, "Did we really think that would work?"